You ever wonder why unbelievers and or some believers lash out instead of heeding the advice that you're trying to help them with? You ever wonder why they do that? You're just trying to help. You're just trying to help. But yet, it doesn't matter what you say or how you say it, they always manage to lash out at you instead. Well, today, as we are going through Proverbs 9, we're going to answer this question. Proverbs 9, it is the culmination, it is the tie together of this opening section of Solomon's Solomon's advice to his children. And contained in here is it's all wrapped up into a nutshell from the first 8 chapters. So if you would, go to Proverbs 9 with me, and we're going to delve right in because there's only 18 verses in chapter 9, and there's one section. It's all about wisdom versus folly. It pits wisdom against foolishness. It pits them against each other and compares the two. And therefore, between the two, we have a choice, and that there are consequences by accepting either invitation that is offered. Both wisdom and folly are personified as women here. And we start off in verses 1 and 2, and wisdom's invitation here. Wisdom is preparing a banquet in the first 2 verses here. It says, wisdom has built her house. She has carved out her 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. You see, wisdom is constructive. She builds her house, and she carved 7 pillars out of it. Now, I'm looking for meaning in the 7 pillar. What are the 7 pillars? And there are scholars who say, well, perhaps this is the 7 pillars are the 7 days of creation, and perhaps it's the sun and the moon and the stars and all this other stuff. But sometimes 7 pillars are just 7 pillars. In other words, what I think is trying to get across here is that 7 pillars means this is a really big house. She's constructive. She's gathering everything together so that she can build a house large enough to handle this big crowd that is coming. You see, wisdom is constructive, not destructive. Wisdom has prepared a bountiful meal. She's prepared meat and mixed wine, as it says there in verse 2. And she's also set her table. You see, in the Jewish tradition, it was tradition to water the wine down. It says mixed wine. And, sometimes they would put fragrances and herbs and things in it to flavor the wine. But moreover than anything, it was a 3-to-1 ratio of water to wine. So in other words, if you have 3 cups of water, you put 1 cup of wine as watered down. And that's the tradition on how they drank their wine. That's why you didn't get drunk off of the wine really easily. It was an everyday drink, and essentially the wine was there for flavor more than anything else. Okay, water in the desert is not readily available in great quantities sometimes, but that was the tradition. But wisdom has prepared this meal. She's prepared this meat. She's literally sacrificed this meat. That prepared there. It's sacrificed the meat. She's prepared it. She's cooked it to perfection. She's mixed the wine. She's set her table. I think of when I see all of this stuff, it makes me think of Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. I love that fall time, and you think of how you get together in the dining room and the table's all set with the fine china and everything's just so. And I was thinking this morning as I was sitting at my desk kind of reviewing all this, and 3/4 of the fun is in the prep that day. I love the preparation. That's what I love. I love the preparation of it all. I love being in the kitchen with with, I miss the days where I was in the kitchen with my grandmother, and we prepared the meal together, and we fellowshipped and we talked, and yeah, it is stressful and it is crazy sometimes, especially, oh my gosh, my grandmother's kitchen was like about the size of the altar right here, just the lower. I mean, her kitchen was so small. But it's that preparation time that's come together. Verses 3 to 6 move on, and we're talking about wisdom's invitation to her banquet. It says she has sent out her servants. She calls out from the highest points of the city. Whoever is inexperienced, enter here. To the one who lacks sense, she says, come and eat my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave an experience behind and you will live. Pursue the way of understanding. Verse 3, like a good hostess, she and her maids go out to invite the people to her banquet. She doesn't just send her servants out. She goes with them. And they go to the highest points of the city to call out to all those who will be willing to listen. She calls out to the naive and those who lack judgment. In other words, those that need her the most. She calls out to the people that need wisdom the most. And as we're going to see here in a few verses, we're going to see that she doesn't call out to the people that have already started on the path of wisdom because they're already on that path. Okay, we're going to get to that here in a few verses. But she calls out to those who need her the most, the naive, those who lack judgment. Verses 5 and 6 talk about, she says, come and eat my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave an experience behind and you will live. Pursue the way of understanding. See, she calls to them to come and eat and drink of her banquet and leave behind the old ways of naivete so that they will gain understanding and live. This next section, Solomon moves through verses 17 to 12, and instead of sticking the consequences at the end, he puts them right in between the two invitations that each one of them offers. And I love the way he does that, because we're talking about consequences of following wisdom. We're talking about the consequences of following folly. As we come into it, let's get into it here. Verses 7 and the first half of verse 8, it says, the one who corrects a mocker will bring dishonor on himself. The one who rebukes a wicked man will get hurt. Don't rebuke a mocker or he will hate you. Let me read that again. The one who corrects a mocker will bring dishonor on himself. The one who rebukes a wicked man will get hurt. Don't rebuke a mocker or he will hate you. If you insist on correcting a mocker, and I wanted, a mocker, I wanted to make sure that I understood precisely what that word was getting at, because somebody who mocks you, you think of a mocker, and that's exactly what the word means. The other words that I came up with, where there were scoffer, scorner, babbler, that's kind of what the original language is getting at here, and it really is this mocking kind of attitude. And if you insist on correcting somebody who is a mocker, somebody who is a scoffer or scorner or a babbler, you're going to be lashed at by them. The mocker will respond with a lashing out against the one who is correcting them, and they will hate you for trying to help them. There's the answer to your question right there. Why do people lash out at you instead of heeding advice? Is because they're not on the path of wisdom. People lash out because of their pride, because there's no possible way that they can be wrong. You see, you can't reach a sinner. If you can't reach a sinner to help them realize they're sinning, it's because they're hardened to their ways. It's because it's like Pharaoh. They've hardened their heart to the point that you can't get through. Before you can actually get through and help them realize that they're sinning, they need Jesus. They need wisdom first. That's the first step in the whole process. They have got to answer the call of Christ. It is why Christianity stands at the top of the city, using the same illustration here. Christianity is standing at the top of the elevation, screaming at the top of our lungs. Homosexuality is wrong. Adultery is wrong. Divorce is wrong. Gossip is wrong. Murder is wrong. We're standing from the rooftops screaming that all of these things are wrong. Well, the reason people aren't hearing us is the fact that they don't have Jesus and they don't recognize that they've got a problem. They're following their own desires, not what God is. The problem is that they don't see this thing as the authority. It's just another collection of books to them. Ancient history, as they call it, or fables so old that I can't believe people still trust in it. There's a reason that they don't. There's a reason that they don't listen, is because they're so hardened to their ways. They're so hardened to the things that they want to hear that they can't see straight. They're so hardened. The place we begin, instead of shouting at the rooftops about what is wrong, we need to start at the rooftops and scream what is right. Jesus is right. That's where you start. You start by correcting, you don't start by correcting, you start by preaching Christ. You start by preaching the Word of God faithfully and let God do the work. God will convict them of their sin if they are a true Christian. God will convict them of it. He does it to me all the time. Anybody who is walking with the Lord will sit there and tell you God convicts them all the time because we need it. Okay? Moving on, the second half of verse 8 and moving on to verse 9, he says, rebuke a wise man and he will love you. Instruct a wise man and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man and he will learn more. If you correct the wise, they're going to love you. You correct the wise and they're going to take it and they're going to use it to learn and gain even more wisdom. The mark of maturity, the mark of wisdom is a person who can take constructive criticism and instead of mocking at them, you love them. You take the criticism and you thank them for it. You take that criticism and you use it to benefit you and turn your ways to even wiser ways yet. That's the mark of a wise man. It says it right there. Verses 10 and 11 move on. He says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by wisdom your days will be many, and your years will be added to your life. My friends, if there is any better summary of the book of Proverbs, verses 10 and 11 have said it right there. It has come up time and time again in the first 8 chapters, has it not? It almost seems, not every week, but almost every week we have read something along the lines of the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the crux of the entire matter. It is it's the glue that holds Proverbs together. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding, which is why I turned and said earlier that you have to have Christ before you can stand at the rooftops and shout at people that they're wrong. And you don't want to shout at them either. You want to lovingly rebuke them and correct them. But that's why, is they don't have Jesus. They don't have wisdom. Okay? Verse 12 says that if you are wise for your own benefit. If you mock, you alone will bear the consequences. Wisdom benefits you. Wisdom benefits you while folly brings consequences. Folly brings consequences. The consequences of heeding wisdom's call or folly's call are deep, and we must understand the consequences of either way we follow. Are we going to follow wisdom's call, who stands and beckons us to gain more understanding and live a wiser life still? Or are we going to answer folly's call and mock and scorn and scoff, and in turn pay the consequences either way. You see, atheists, atheists don't believe in a God. They don't believe anything's there at all. God will give you what you desire. They'll get a world without God. It's called hell. They'll get a world without God. And they, weeping and gnashing of teeth is what Matthew describes it as. I don't know about y'all, but that's not a comfortable picture to be thinking about. There are consequences to following wisdom. There are consequences to following folly. Choosing wisdom will result in a tough life and difficult decisions, because there are going to be times when you're going to have to, as the saying goes, you're going to have to take the higher road. Instead of lashing back out at somebody, you're going to have to take the higher road and give grace and forgiveness and mercy where it's needed, instead of mocking. People who live a life of folly live a destructive life. It's just not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And we will bear the consequences of either one. The last section here is folly's invitation, and verse 13 says, the woman folly is rowdy, she is gullible and knows nothing. You see, in contrast to wisdom, folly is a rowdy woman. She's gullible, she's unknowing, she's very, very attractive, but she's unruly and undisciplined, as we've discussed before. She's very unruly, very undisciplined, but she is so seductive, so beautiful. Verses 14 and 15 says, she sits by the doorway of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling to those who pass by, who go straight ahead on their paths. You see, folly, instead, in contrast to wisdom, wisdom takes her and her servants and they go out to the highest point, seeking people out. Folly, on the other hand, just sits at her door and calls out. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't prepare a meal. She doesn't prepare or seek out anybody. She devours anybody who dares to go near her. Okay? She devours anyone who dares to come near her. Verses 16 and 17 say, whoever is inexperienced, enter here. To the one who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten secretly is tasty. You see, she calls out to the same people that wisdom does. It's the people that are naive. It is the people who lack judgment. Her banquet isn't prepared, it's stolen. You know, that verse, stolen water is sweet, refers, kind of like how a fountain is referred to as the love of between a man and a wife. Likewise here, we're talking about illicit love. We're talking about wrong love. Stolen water is sweet. And yes, as we've said in a previous sermon, it sure does seem sweet at the time. But later the consequences will absolutely and utterly destroy you. Bread eaten in secret is tasty. Again, folly does her work in the dark. Folly does her work in secret, in the quiet, in the places where, just beneath the surface where people can't see. And somebody's ever done something and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. Happens all the time, doesn't it? Because it lies just beneath the surface. I'm willing to bet that most people have one thing that they don't want anyone to know. Right there below the surface. Because of fear, because of whatever reason it may be. But the sin that goes on in secret must be brought to the light. Verse 18 says, but he doesn't know that the departed spirits are there, that are guests, are in the depths of Sheol. You see, those who go to folly instead of wisdom don't realize that death awaits them. Going back to the analogy of the atheists, they think there's no God. They think there is no life after death. And what they don't realize What they don't realize is what awaits them. They'd have no idea. They think it's fables. Again, as I said earlier, they don't believe that this thing is the Word of God. They don't believe in the authority that this thing has. And they don't understand that their way is the way to destruction. And more times than not, atheists, Richard Dawkins, one of the world's foremost scientists, Stephen Hawking, one of the world's most brilliant minds in history. They think they're knowledgeable, and yet they know nothing. Sorry, it proves Proverbs true over and over again that wisdom is not the way to life. Wisdom is not the way to life. They don't realize that other death and destruction wait for them. And honestly, I don't hate the atheists. I pity them. I really do. I pity them. I feel so bad for them. And it's like, I don't understand how you couldn't believe. I don't get it. I don't understand how you can look at it and not think that God is very real and very active. You see, wisdom and folly, in summary and conclusion, wisdom and folly call out to the same people. Wisdom prepares a bountiful banquet, and folly, just literally as the word says, she bellers out in the halls from her door and provides a meal that is stolen. Wisdom appeals to those seeking life. Folly appeals to those wanting to follow their own way. In other words, the base desires of the human heart. It's what folly does. And it ends in death. My big idea that I always give there, I didn't come up with that one-liner sentence because God already did it for me. It's verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. I can't improve upon that. I just can't. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that, my friends, is the whole point of Christianity. It's the fear of the Lord. We fear the Lord because of the history that has been proven over and over again. We looked at that in the Sunday school. Both lessons. We're on this whole idea that we see the actions of Israel over and over, and when they stray from God, they end up destructed, and they're paying the consequences of their actions. Simply put, and I'm sorry, you may not agree with me, but the same thing's going to happen regardless. We'll pay the consequences of our actions. We may be saved, but it'll be barely getting through the door. There are consequences to our actions. I go back to that physics law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Physics is right. It's because they got it from God. There is an equal and opposite reaction to everything that we do. And the more you pursue wisdom, the more that you pursue this wise way of living, the more wisdom you're going to gain. And the more wisdom you gain, I don't want to say the better your life will be, but it sure will make a difference. It'll lead you in times that are difficult it'll lead you out of turmoil. It'll lead you out of just utter heartache, and we just have to latch onto it. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And if you've never accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, let me say it again, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fearing the Lord begins with making a choice for Jesus Christ, not only to come up and get baptized, but to walk that way of wisdom, discipleship is what I would term it as. Wisdom is essentially that. You're discipling one another to learn the ways of Jesus Christ. The walk of a Christian is not easy. Room full of people here, I'll tell you that. It's hard. Downright frustrating at times. But the one thing I can guarantee is that you will have a family that will stand beside you through anything. You'll have a family that stands beside you despite what happens. You'll have people that you can lean on. You will have a God who has promised he will never leave you nor forsake you. As we come to invitation time, if you need some prayer, if you need to give your life to Christ, I urge you to come forward, stay in your seat, raise your hand, pray to God right where you're at. Do whatever it is that God is leading you to do. Don't squash him. Let him lead.